You're not going to want to miss this episode of the AI Show. We talk all about trustworthy agents with my friend Sarah Bird. Make sure you tune in. Hello, welcome to this episode of the AI Show. We're talking all about trustworthy agents. AI agents, though. We gotta be specific because you mean AI agents, right? With my
Yeah,
friend
I
Sarah Bird.
really don't know how to help anything but the AI agents.
That's right. Not the secret agents. We're not those kinds
I'm
of
not
people.
qualified for that.
So let's talk first, and I think this is the important bit because in the morass of terminology that's been spewed forth in this particular segment, can you tell me what you consider an agent to be? And once we get that, can we get a sense for like, hey, why should people not trust them? Because I think that's the first thing, the zero trust that they ingrain in us. So let's start with agents and then maybe some risks and stuff. Let's go with that.
Yeah. I think in some ways it doesn't really matter what an agent is. I know everyone loves to start with the definition of it, but there are a couple properties of whatever your definition of an agent is that matter, I think, in the story of what we need to do to build them in a way that is trustworthy.
Right.
And so first of all, let me say something about trustworthy, because I think trustworthy is a really important term here, because it's not only that you trust the agent, but they're actually worthy of your trust, right? We see all the time that people trust in technology that they shouldn't. And so the goal is to get to a place where that trust is actually well placed. And so that's why, I've been using the term trustworthy agents. And what matters about an agent from my point of view, one, that they do larger amounts of work more autonomously. And so that, and we can talk about this a little bit later, that changes the role of human oversight and where humans fit in the loop. And that's part of what's so exciting about it, that you can actually have something go and maybe complete a whole task for you, or maybe multiple tasks, rather than having to watch it every minute. But it does change what we need to do. I think the second part that matters about agents is that a lot of them are using tools. And in the future, a tool might just be an agent and, definitions. But the point is they can pull together many different capabilities. And that means that there's more places that data can leak. That means that there's more actions they could take that are irreversible. And so their ability to take kind of major actions and do larger units of work are what really make it feel kind of different in terms of what we were doing as compared to like just a, RAG-based chat system.
Yeah. So I love the idea of trust and then worthiness of that trust, and those two. So can we get a little more specific on what are the kinds of risks? Because I always tend to think of this in terms of like, I don't know, as engineers, we're always like, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then we code around it. Can you give us a sense of like the kinds of risks that we need to be mitigating in this case, or thinking about or considering?
Yeah. So there's a study that came out this year that I really like, which is by the University of Melbourne and KPMG. And it looks at how people are using AI systems, how they feel about them. And they've surveyed, I think, almost 50,000 people around the world in 47 different countries. And another thing that's cool about this survey is that they actually had started it pre-ChatGPT. So we get to see the before and after of people having so much more AI in their everyday lives that they're aware of, because we all know we had AI before, but with generative AI, you're interacting with it. The average person knows that it's AI, and so it's different. And what we saw, unfortunately, is that across all of kind of the major trust dimensions, trust was going down, right? And so we see adoption going up. We see employers saying that they're going to deploy agents alongside their human workforce over the next 18 months. But trust in these systems is going down. And we would expect it the other way, where you become more familiar with them, you kind of build a working model and you trust it. And in the study, they kind of catalog a whole range of risk that people are worried about and why trust is going down. And I'm going to give you a framework that we've been using to think about that, because I really like kind of what this is saying. And the first is people do not trust AI systems because of malfunctions. And I've actually been on the show talking about malfunctions a ton. Oh, the system hallucinates, or the system, makes some other kind of mistake. So in the case of agents, you can imagine it doesn't understand your intent, it goes off task, it picks the incorrect tool. All of those would be examples of malfunctions. But people are also concerned about misuse. Can someone, use a prompt injection attack on my system and cause it to leak sensitive data? Or can I use an agent to automate what was already problematic activity in the world, like criminal enterprises, scams, things like that? But the last element, which matters just as much, and particularly in this digital sort of working side by side with agents, this like digital labor conversation, is systemic risk. So what is the impact of the technology overall? And so people are worried about things like, are we going to be de-skilling humans? And we've seen that in the press a lot recently. Are we going to have job loss? Are we going to have loss of human connection? Because now I talk to an agent all day instead of talking to my coworker. And so when we think about making agents trustworthy, we cannot look only at one of these. If we fix all the malfunctions, people are still going to be worried about the other things. And so at Microsoft, we actually look across this, but it's very different tools that we need to do address each of these. Malfunctions can be a lot more like tools for developers, where some of the systemic risk are things like regulations or training programs or all sorts of different things. And so we have to look very broadly at how we address each of these risks.
So I love the framework because as a developer, I tend to only think of malfunction, which is the one I love how you said that. But misuse is another huge one. But the one that I almost never think about is systemic, like regulatory issues with respect to usage. So those feel like, I'm glad you're here and telling us about that, because I always only thought about malfunction, but misuse and systemic are also super important and can sync or elevate what you're doing. How are you, Sarah, or Microsoft helping us in those three areas?
Yeah, so malfunctions and misuse, there's some things we have to do a little differently for each of them, but also a lot that's the same. And so that is using a lot of what we've talked about before in terms of defense in depth and evaluations and things. But to make it more concrete, when we look at agents specifically, one of the things that's interesting about agents is that they're basically a new type of entity in our system. And so we already have users that can make errors. We already have applications that can, be hijacked, all sorts of things. So we have these entities already in our systems: users, devices, and applications. And so agents are just a new type of entity. And so one of the first things we're doing is taking our existing security and governance planes and adapting them to work for this additional entity. Because, for example, an agent, I might sometimes want it to behave as a user, right? I might want it to be able to interact on my behalf, but it doesn't mean I want it to have all the same permissions that I have as Sarah Bird. And it can't necessarily use all the proof of humanness type of things that we use to allow people to log in today. So that's kind of one side. And then for anyone that's watched any of the past episodes, it's also probably not surprising that it brings new types of risk. For example, I mentioned some of the earlier, the system going off task, getting confused, picking the wrong tool. And so the other thing we're doing is extending our systems to address those new specific types of risks we get in agents. And if we put those two together, it works great. And so bringing our existing, security story that's already been about protecting against malfunctions and misuses, but extending it for the new concept of agents and these new risks gets us a long way. But on the systemic risk side, there's actually kind of more like bigger picture work that has to be done there. And so, Microsoft just formed a whole new organization under Brad Smith that is focused on these bigger picture issues and looking for how we make sure that technology has very positive impact, but also that the world is ready for it. And ready for it can be everything from, as we said, regulations and best practices to actually different skilling programs. Microsoft, for example, put out LinkedIn Learning to help people learn how to use AI, and that has been massively adopted. And so there's no one thing that fixes all of these, but we've got a lot of experience that we get to build on.
I love the idea that, and this is the part where, uh, look, you and I have had discussions, on our own about this stuff. The thing that drives me a little wacky is how we somehow folks are like discarding the stuff that we've already done in security and in machine learning and be like, well, but this is a new age of AI. So what you're saying is that for the misuse and for the malfunctions, we already have a good set of practices for security, for ways of testing models to make sure they're doing the right thing, hallucinating. We've done this. So you need to use the standard things there plus a tiny bit more. Is that kind of what you're saying for
Yeah.
those two easy ones?
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, for example, a key part of how a lot of our security systems work today is based on the concept of identity. And at Microsoft, we use Entra, and many people around the world use Entra to implement that. And Entra already has the concept of, okay, based on your identity, you have conditional access. You get access to this resource, or you don't get access because the device is out of date and it might have a security vulnerability. And so those like foundational primitives of identity and conditional access, we don't need to go reinvent those. We just need to extend them to make sense in the context of an agent and what an agent would do. But we also need to know that now there's new ways that an agent could make a mistake or could be compromised. And so we also need to make sure that our detection systems, our guardrails, all of the behavioral boundaries we want to put in place take account for these new types of failure modes.
Yeah, and that's cool because like the concept of a software having an identity is not new. We've been doing this with service principles
Exactly.
forever.
And so thank goodness, because it would be horrible if we had to reinvent all of this. I don't know what we would do. So it's amazing that we have, a lot of the security, both at Microsoft, the security organization, but the field overall has figured out how to address a lot of these issues in patterns that work in everyday organizations.
And then the systemic ones, it's more of an education, but there's also things that you can do in the service to help people know. Because I remember seeing something in the service where it's like, how are you doing with the new EU regulation? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I think that part of, like, we've talked about this before, but part of making AI and humans work well together is making AI understandable for people. And so, how we design the AI systems, the level of transparency, the user interfaces really guide people into those happy collaboration patterns. And that can help you build the right mental working model and build more trust with the system and also be more successful. And so, I think this is super important in the conversation around vibe coding, where it's an incredibly powerful technique that can help you do a lot, but it doesn't help you do everything. And so the more we can design interfaces that help people when to know that this is the right tool for the job, or what other things you have to combine that with. You still need to go through your security reviews if you want to put that into production, I think can really help kind of put these pieces together. And you're right, we just hit a major milestone for the EU AI Act. The regulations for the GPI models are now in force. And what that means is general purpose AI models. There's now new requirements for the people that are providers or creators of those models around ensuring that they have the right level of testing and they're providing the right level of transparency. And so it's really exciting to kind of have one of the first globally impacting regulations have a major milestone taking effect, and customers are asking us about it. It's helped us have a more, let's say, sophisticated conversation with customers who say, okay, well, how are you doing this? And we're able to like learn from each other and teach each other. And so, I think it's an important part of a healthy ecosystem.
And you touched upon this a little bit, but let's get into it a little bit more in depth. this notion of human oversight over AI. You started to talk about that a little bit with the vibe coding stuff, but can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on that aspect of this whole topic?
Yeah, human oversight has been obviously it's a goal overall, and Microsoft's principles accountability is about humans being accountable for the systems that we develop and the systems that we use. But then I will say, in kind of the chat era, we could be a little, let's say, basic, where we just said, okay, well, the chat system makes mistakes, but there's a human user right there. So the human is in the loop at every step. And so we can just have the human, look at things and correct for errors. And obviously, we know that that's not perfect. And there were kind of early signs that that was never going to be enough, because we had people coming to us and saying, hey, we're building a coding system for people that don't code. And we'd say, okay, well, what happens if it makes an error? And they're like, oh, well, they'll just find the error. How? Right? And so it was already, like, clear that that paradigm was not gonna solve the problem completely. But agents really puts this on steroids, because the whole point is you don't want to, review every single step that the agent is taking, if we're going to get the full promise of the technology. And so the idea here is that we need to take humans from the inner loop to the outer loop. But that doesn't mean that we should have less human oversight. We just need a different way to do that. So, for example, in responsible AI, one of the things that we've been able to do, and you all get to benefit from this if you're using our AI systems or you're using our evaluation tools, is we've pushed a lot of the work now into creating really good automated evaluations to test our AI systems. And that's been amazing, because we can test many, many more things than we could before, because we only have so many experts, but we can run tests at scale. But we still need humans to certify that the testing system's actually working, right? So we have experts, periodically sample different examples and make adjustments. And so we feel confident in the automated testing system. Is it right 100% of the time? No, but it still allows us to achieve a good amount of oversight in what we think the systems are doing. And that's not the only mechanism we use. And so for agents, we're going to see the same thing, where we are going to end up having different interfaces that allow humans to provide oversight, whether that's in pre-deployment testing, whether that's in monitoring. So observability, that's why we've been investing so much in Foundry observability, are critical for agents. And those are all about human oversight. It's just not happening at the level of every single individual interaction.
And that's interesting, because I love the way how you're basically converting agentic processes into documenting what it's doing in a way that humans can consume and do oversight. Because then that tells me as a dev, when I'm using agentic patterns in my own software, I should really consider, like, hey, what are some irreversible actions, or what are some actions that maybe don't matter as much? And should I document for oversight, or should I ask for permission? And there's like a spectrum for building these things for oversight. Am I getting this right?
Yeah, and like, let's pretend you're building an agent that you just want to do one task really well over and over again. It's about automating something at scale for your company. The way you want to do that, I'm pretty sure you don't want to be on the hook every single day, all day, to review every test before the agent does it. You want to run tests that say, look, 99% of the time the agent gets it right. And when it doesn't get it right, we have guardrails in place that block it from doing anything problematic, and it knows to retry, let's say. And so what you want to review is the test, or you want to review ongoing monitoring that says 99% of the time it's getting it right. And again, the 1% of the time we have graceful fallback mechanisms that address the issue. And so it's about what you as the human want to be reviewing, and when you as the human want to be intervening. And it's not at the level of every individual interaction. It just changes it's still the same thing, but it just changes when you do it and what you're looking at.
Yeah, and I remember long ago, right after, and I'm dating myself, right after 9/11, we were building some software that looked at risk, but the axes for risk is not just risk, but it's also impact. And so those two axes you need to consider.
Yep.
And so, for example, if the risk is low, but the impact is high, maybe in this case you need to think about how to surface this as an oversight for humans. If the risk is super high, but the impact is super low, then maybe it's okay to have a dashboard. I mean, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. In terms of, I was throwing out 99% and 1% failure rate might be fine for some applications, but not others. But then it's how you can handle that failure. And so, a key mechanisms for agents is being able to go back to the human. You do have that human. Potentially who can weigh in on a particular task. You just don't want to use it all the time. You can also look at like blocking and restarting. You can look at conditional access, gives you opportunities to go and request permissions to do things on rare events. So we're really looking at putting all of these different types of interventions together to allow you to handle everything from kind of benign failures to much higher risk actions.
I love it. So, any other things that that maybe we missed during this conversation that people should consider when it comes to trustworthy AI agents?
Yeah, I would just say a couple things, which is more to come. We're doing lots of work here. We're going to be really excited to show you more stuff in the future. But I know folks are getting started with agents today, and we're learning a lot from that. And so I think just what we've said from the beginning with AI, which is make sure you get started on narrower, low stakes, figure out how to really use the tools well, and then you can kind of expand your ambition, right? So that you understand what is the cost of a failure, to say what we were just talking about. And so I think it's great if folks get started today, use the tools that we already have, but then I think that we're going to have lots of new exciting stuff coming in this area as well.
I love it. So here's a skilling plan that they told us to show y'all to build secure and responsible AI solutions and manage generative AI lifecycles. So take a look at that. Thank you so much for being with us, my friend.
Yeah, glad to be here, and looking forward to the next 6 months. I think it's going to be a pretty fun time.
Amazing. And thank you so much for watching and learning all about trustworthy AI agents with my friend Sarah Bird. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Take care.